That is the question that echoed across Petco Park on Monday night, May 18, 2026, when what started as a tightly contested Dodgers Padres matchup suddenly exploded into one of the most controversial moments of the 2026 MLB season. One play. One catcher. One stolen base attempt. And in the blink of an eye, benches were emptying, coaches were screaming, and two Padres players were walking back to the locker room early, with umpires' hands pointing them toward the exit. But to understand why that moment hit so hard, you have to go back to the fourth inning. You have to go back to the moment Shohei Ohtani put his foot on the gas. The score was tight. Padres leading 1-0 in what had been a disciplined, grinding game, the kind of low-scoring battle that Petco Park seems to specialize in producing. The Dodgers were trailing, frustrated, searching for any kind of spark. And then, Shohei Ohtani reached base. It is important to understand what this means in 2026. When Ohtani gets on base, the entire ballpark shifts. Pitchers begin rushing. Catchers tighten their grip. Infielders cheat toward their positions. Because everyone in professional baseball knows, once Ohtani decides he is going, he is nearly impossible to stop. He is not simply fast. He is calculated. He reads pitchers with the same precision he used to dismantle them from the mound. He knows exactly when to go, and he rarely guesses wrong. So when Ohtani took his lead off first base in the fourth inning, the Padres catcher behind the plate was already in full alert mode. That much was visible. That much was understandable. What happened next, however, was not. As Ohtani broke toward second base, the Padres catcher rose from his crouch and made his throw, but in doing so, his movement directly impacted Ohtani's path. This was not a subtle play. This was not the kind of borderline contact that gets debated quietly in a film room after the game. This was the kind of physical interference that players, coaches, and fans see in real time and immediately react to. Ohtani, who was reading the play perfectly, was visibly disrupted mid-stride. The Dodgers dugout erupted instantly. Now, it is worth pausing here to note something important. Catcher's interference on stolen base attempts is one of the most scrutinized plays in baseball. The rule is clear: a catcher cannot obstruct the batter's swing or physically impede a base runner's attempt. But the line between aggressive defense and illegal interference can sometimes look different depending on where you are standing. The umpires are trained to see it. The players feel it. And the dugouts react to it in ways that, on a night like this, can spiral very quickly. On Monday night in San Diego, there was very little debate among the people who mattered most, the umpires on the field. They made their call. Catcher's interference. Ohtani awarded the base. And that is when the real chaos started. The Padres did not accept the call quietly. Within seconds of the umpire's signal, the San Diego dugout was in motion. Coaches stormed toward the field. Players left the bench. The Padres manager made his way out to argue, his voice rising with each step, his gestures growing sharper, his frustration spilling out in a way that made it clear this was no longer just about one play. This was about pressure. This was about a season that has not gone exactly as planned for San Diego. This was about facing a Dodgers team that refuses to be beaten quietly. The Dodgers, for their part, were not silent either. The exchange between the two dugouts, players shouting across the field, coaches challenging one another's words, the crowd at Petco Park fully engaged and adding their own voice to the noise, created the kind of atmosphere that reminds you baseball is still, at its core, a deeply emotional game. Numbers and analytics and spin rate data are part of the sport now. But none of that mattered in this moment. What mattered was the anger, the pride, and the feeling that something unfair had just happened, depending on which uniform you were wearing. Shouts flew. The volume escalated. And then the umpires stepped in. When the crew chief called for order, the chaos did not immediately stop. Arguments continued. Voices were still raised. And in the middle of it all, two Padres players crossed the line that professional baseball has defined very clearly, a line that, once crossed, leaves the umpires with only one choice. Both players were ejected. This is a moment worth understanding fully, because ejections of this nature do not happen casually. Umpires in Major League Baseball are not looking for confrontation. They are trained to manage disagreement. They give players and coaches room to express frustration, because frustration is part of a competitive sport played at the highest level. But when conduct becomes something that disrupts the game in a way that cannot be managed, when a player makes the umpire feel there is no other option, the ejection becomes the only available response. Two Padres players received exactly that response. The penalties were severe, not just in terms of the immediate impact, losing two players mid-game in a tight series, but in terms of what comes next. Both players now face review. Fines are almost certain. Suspension hearings are a strong possibility. And in a division race that is genuinely competitive, losing players to suspension is a consequence that goes far beyond Monday night. The game itself ended with the Padres holding on to win 1-0, a result that will keep the score column in San Diego's favor for one night. But results exist in context. And the context of Monday night's game is complicated. The Dodgers lost the game. But they may have gained something harder to measure. Ohtani was once again at the center of everything. He was once again the player that opponents cannot figure out how to handle, the player whose presence on the bases changes the entire dynamic of a game, even when the final score does not reflect it. The Padres catcher's decision to contest his stolen base attempt, and the way that decision unfolded, tells you something important about how San Diego approaches this rivalry. They are afraid of Ohtani's speed. They know what he can do. They have seen what he is capable of. And on Monday night, in the fourth inning, that fear produced a moment of overcorrection that cost them two players and handed the Dodgers a legitimate grievance heading into the rest of this series. There are two more games left at Petco Park this week, Tuesday and Wednesday. The Padres now enter those games without two contributors who may have played key roles. The Dodgers enter with the momentum that comes from being on the right side of a controversial call, and with the knowledge that their best player once again showed the kind of instinct on the bases that no defensive scheme can fully neutralize. The Dodgers and Padres have been building toward this kind of intensity for years. This is not a rivalry born out of proximity alone, though Los Angeles and San Diego are separated by barely 100 miles. This is a rivalry built on competition for the NL West, on playoffs that have intersected at critical moments, on two organizations that have invested deeply in talent and genuinely believe they can win at the highest level. In that context, Monday night's incident is not a surprise. It is almost an inevitability. When you put two teams this competitive in the same ballpark, with this much at stake, and one of the most electrifying players in the sport is on the bases trying to change the game, situations like this happen. Emotions run high. Mistakes are made. And the umpires are left to manage a situation that was always going to require someone drawing a firm line. What matters now is how both teams respond. The Padres need to respond with discipline. They cannot afford more ejections. They cannot afford the distraction. They have a strong pitching staff and a lineup capable of beating anyone, but not if players are sitting out games because of conduct that goes beyond the line. The Dodgers need to respond with focus. A 1-0 loss in a series like this is not defining. What defines a team is what comes next, whether they channel the frustration of Monday night into sharper execution on Tuesday. And somewhere in all of this, Shohei Ohtani will show up to the ballpark on Tuesday, go through his routine, eat precisely what his body requires, study exactly the information he needs to study, and prepare in the way that he has been preparing since long before he ever set foot in the major leagues. Because that is what separates him from everyone else. Not the statistics. Not the contracts. Not the headlines. It is the consistency. The preparation. The refusal to let the chaos of a moment like Monday night change who he is or how he approaches the next game. The Padres catcher sparked a heated argument. The dugouts clashed. The umpires handed down penalties that will be felt for games to come. But Shohei Ohtani will simply show up tomorrow, and try to do it again. That, more than anything else that happened at Petco Park on Monday night, is what should worry San Diego the most.